Are you sick of drawing action scenes that feel slow, static, and sluggish? I struggle with exactly the same thing. I'd see incredible action scenes in comic books, anime, and manga, and wished I could get that same snappy action into my scenes. Well, I channeled a lot of energy into figuring out how the very best do it, and it transformed how I approach pages. So now I'm going to share 5 simple tricks that will turn your pages from whack to action. This first step is the pose. Every other step will build upon this one and amplify it. And by pose, I don't mean hands on hips, chin tilted up, pouting at the camera. Well, that is a pose, but not an action pose. I just mean the way that you positioned your character in your drawing. Now there's almost an infinite number of ways that you can position your character. Play around with it, have fun, find the right one that works for you. Bringing this back to action scenes, a moment or beat all revolves around a character doing something. Let's focus on the classic superhero trope of a hero punching a villain. So in this case, the word beat is pretty literal. Now, the way that the image is presented matters. This drawing shows that the hero is punching the villain, but there's nothing inherently exciting about the way that it's being presented. Now you want to pick an angle and a pose for your characters that really sells the impact of the punch to your readers. Part of that is picking a great pose, something really dynamic and cool to show the hero swinging the punch. But equally important is how the villain reacts to it. Now, it might take quite a few goes to find the right way to sell this moment. Try playing around in your sketchbook or a spare piece of paper. Play around, try different variations until you find the one that really connects the most. Now, my next tip is sort of like a super spy in that it's got several names, but I like to call it secondary movement. Now, the figures in motion are the primary movement in the scene, but you can enhance the effect of their movement even further by having secondary movement. By secondary movement, I'm referring to the movement of things like hair, clothing, and accessories. Now, their movement will really help exaggerate the movement of the characters that they're attached to. So you can see how flowing hair trailing behind the character's path of motion will really add life to that scene. Equally, you can see how a coat flowing behind a character can really add life and energy to a moment. And you can also see how a trail of saliva flying off the lip of a villain being punched can really add an energetic grit to the scene. Now, this is the power of secondary movement. Now, see how the two versions compare? It should be pretty night and day. One version is quite static, the other version has got bags of energy added to it. If you're finding these tips useful and interesting so far, then please hit that like button. But don't hit it with the force of the punch in this drawing. Otherwise, the secondary movement will be mouse buttons flying off or shards of glass flying past your bleeding thumb as it punctures your phone screen, and nobody wants that. The next tip is a solid gold classic. It's probably the easiest way to transform the energy levels in your drawing. It is the speed line, or speed lines I should say, because one is never enough. They're simple on the surface, but to use them at their most effective can take a little bit of time to master. I'm going to add them here just to the background. You can draw them parallel or all radiating out from a single point. Either way, they should be positioned to enhance the motion of the figures, probably travelling in the same direction as the punch in this instance. Try to avoid spacing them out evenly, because that can flatten them into a sort of pattern and you'll lose energy that way. I like to cluster them around the edges into like sort of spiky clumps. Now, finding what you like best is really a matter of personal preference and maybe trial and error. Now, this next tip could also be categorized under speed lines, but it's speed lines being used in a very focused and specific way. Now, I'm talking about blur lines. If you've studied any manga action scenes, you will almost certainly have seen this technique in use. Blur lines are when parts of a character's line art are replaced with loads of tiny little speed lines to give the effect that it's moving so fast that it's blurred. After the pose, it might be the most challenging tip to implement effectively into your drawing. I practiced them a lot before I felt comfortable using them. It was well worth it though. They allow some really fine control over which parts of your character you want to add fast motion to. You can use blur lines on your figures, but also objects and scenery too. And see how much more energy is packed into this drawing once I've added blur lines onto the character's fist. I really recommend checking out some great action manga to see how this can be implemented. There's loads of places you can do so, obviously bookshops or the Shonen Jump app. But yeah, have a look, see how other artists are implementing it and take ideas from them. The next tip might feel like the cherry on top of a very rich sundae, but I promise you it's very valuable to learn and will really give an extra bit of punch to your action scenes, even if your pose isn't quite where you wanted it to be. Before I tell you what it is, I'd like to ask a cheeky favour really quick. If you wouldn't mind subscribing to the channel, if you're interested in these sort of videos, it will really help me know that I'm on the right track. You're a diamond, thank you. So that tip, impact. So this covers a few different things which I'm squeezing under one umbrella for speed, really. So I'm talking about dust clouds, I'm talking about splashes, and I'm talking about those sort of impacty starburst shapes that come out when something's colliding. I try to utilize these elements in really dynamic ways to push the scene into a whole new realm of excitement and energy. A burst of impact circling a point of contact will really ram home the physicality of an action. Dust clouds will show that the characters are displacing the air around them with their actions. And the splashes basically work the same way, but across water, or if the action's going over a puddle or something like that. Basically, think about how your character's actions affect the scene around them, and it will really help knock the dust off of your scenes. My next few videos will break down all of these tips in further detail to really help you implement them effectively in your own work. Go check those out next. Please consider liking and subscribing if you found this video at all useful. It really helps let me know if I'm on the right track. If you've got any other action tips that you'd recommend, let me and the other viewers know in the comments below. It'd be great to hear them. Thank you so much, and I really hope that my little rundown of top action tips has been helpful. Thanks, and see you in the next video.